For years, lawyer Carrie Goldberg lived in fear of what an ex-boyfriend might do to her and her sexual privacy. That wasn't until Goldberg learned how to fight back for herself and other abuse survivors. In her new book, Nobody's Victim, Goldberg details her experiences helping people fight what she calls psychos, stalkers, pervs, and trolls, both online and in the real world. Newsy sat down with Goldberg to discuss her book and what she says is her crusade to transform clients from victims into warriors. Detail a little bit how you came to be on the front lines of this war against sexual violence and privacy violation.
So I have a law firm in Brooklyn, and we have a pretty unique practice area where we fight against psychos, a-holes, trolls, and pervs. And we represent people who've been the victims of sexual harassment, blackmail, and online harassment. I realized, that after having, hundreds of interactions with clients and having so many different kinds of litigations, that we were seeing real patterns in the kinds of predators that we were dealing with. And I wanted to share, through the stories of our clients' cases, I wanted to share, what the pictures of the offenders are. And I feel that if you know what to expect if you're under attack, it makes it so much easier to know what to do. I got an involuntary education into this world. I met somebody online, and we had kind of an instant relationship, and it very quickly went from being, I was delighted that he was so focused on me, to it becoming this complete nightmare where he was obsessively, tracking me and stalking me. And when I ended the relationship, he told me that he was going to spend the rest of his life destroying mine. And he said that there was no hole deep enough for the tsunami that was coming. All of us are a moment away from crossing paths with somebody who's hell-bent on our destruction.
So how do you maintain that fighting spirit, especially for clients when your whole world is collapsing? Your job or your schoolmates or your family, some people you described that they were kicked out of their homes for when photos came online. How do you maintain that sort of determination to seek justice?
The fighting spirit can't always be expected to come from within. Sometimes you need people like rooting for you and helping.
How does the law and the law culture stay ahead of the tech and the tech culture, maybe even the social culture, about what's appropriate and what's not appropriate?
I think it really lies with the lawmakers. Like, they need to be recognizing the development and evolution of technology and how it's hurting people, and understand that it's women, it's minorities, it's people who are generally already marginalized that are the victims.
You frequently cite the evils of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which, for anyone who may not know, more or less absolves companies of any liability when it comes to the content that users post on their platforms. So describe that a little bit.
This law went into effect basically to say that, if somebody posts something about you on a platform, you can sue the poster, but you're not able to sue the platform. In our case against Grindr, our client was being impersonated on Grindr by his ex-boyfriend, and he reported it to Grindr 50 times. And yet it was still continuing, and Grindr was in the exclusive role to be able to help him. And they didn't. They chose not to. When we finally got them to court, they said that they didn't have the technology to exclude a user. Certainly, if you have a dating app with the sole purpose of facilitating online sexual encounters, it's definitely going to be abused from time to time by rapists, by child predators, by stalkers. And if you haven't built into the app a way to protect your users, then it's defective. And the court threw it out. Right. And said that Grindr was immune from liability. And this was a really big expansion of the Communications Decency Act. If these humongous corporations are outside the reach of our judicial system, then they have no incentive to ever respond to complaints by users or emergencies that users have. They don't have any incentive to be designing products that actually, look at the ways that they can be abused. It's like if the car industry could never be sued we wouldn't have seatbelts, we wouldn't have windshield wipers. The threat of lawsuit keeps us all safe.
And you represented a handful of clients who were accusing Hollywood executive Harvey Weinstein of sexual misconduct. Briefly describe this, give us some insight into that case and sort of how that was a watershed moment for how we look at power in relation to sexual violence and violations of privacy.
Yeah, I mean, the allegations against Harvey Weinstein kicked off the Me Too movement. Our client, Lucia Evans, was one of the two people who caused him to be arrested. Her allegations caused him to be arrested. And then, through, in my opinion, mistakes by the DA's office, they ended up dismissing her claims. But I just hope that justice will be had. We can't let these powerful predators off the hook.
These sort of violations, they disproportionately affect communities of color, marginalized communities, minority communities, particularly black women. How much more difficult is it for those communities and those people who may not have access to resources or the means to find justice or get justice to pursue that course?
I think there are multiple problems. I think that I represent a number of girls of color who've been sexually assaulted at school, and then when they report it, they're punished. And I have a whole chapter about that in the book. And I think one of the biggest problems that we encounter is that they're not believed, and they're not protected, and they're not given resources, and there are assumptions made that they cause the behavior. But then there's also the issue of like the bureaucrats that are supposed to be managing the systems and the procedures, particularly like in schools, but also in the criminal justice system. They don't think they're going to get caught. So if they are dismissive toward allegations, they don't think anyone's going to ever find out. They don't think these people are going to have the access to justice, to find lawyers, to then hold schools and accountable. And so there's so many levels of betrayals that they have to suffer.
The final chapter of Nobody's Victim is less a conclusion so much as a call to action against harassment and sexual violence, with Goldberg putting the stalkers, abusers, and victim blamers of the world on notice. She writes, "We may have been victimized once, but we're not victims. We are an army of warriors, and we won't back down."